So, Dungeons and Developers and developer experience, two of the things that I'm really big fan of. So I would like to make it as fast as possible, just that slight title, because I have a lot of interesting things to share with you. So, my name is Jakub, and I was already introduced. I am a full stack or front-end developer at Montreal. I'm also a part of a Nux ecosystem team. I will talk about it a bit later. And I'm also a Google developer expert in web performance. So, do we have any Dungeons and Dragons fans here? I hope so. I know that there is Anna and there is Alex Lichter. I know them because we played a D&D session together. But if you have not tried Dungeons and Dragons yet, you should definitely do it. You should definitely try it. It's an amazing role-playing game where a group of friends can meet, and one of them is a dungeon master, which is basically a person that takes the group through certain scenario, through certain story, and tells them what encounters, what enemies they encounter, what people they meet, what things they encounter during the journey. And the other players pretend or believe that they are someone else, like a knight in a shiny armor or maybe a sneaky rogue. So it's amazing, and I definitely recommend you to try it. So what is developer experience? So GetReport has this definition for developer experience. So it is about ensuring that developers are able to conduct the work they need to do with velocity and quality. But my honest definition would be that developer experience is about making our life as developers easier so that we can focus on solving difficult challenges rather than fighting the configuration and other stuff. Why does good or why is good developer experience important? Why does it matter? The thing is that the better developer experience equals improved developer productivity, which means that if there is a tool on the market that delivers certain set of functionalities, and there is another tool on the market that delivers the same amount of functionalities but provide better developer experience, more and more developers will transition to it, purely because we as developers love when we can just focus on solving problems than, as I mentioned, working with configuration and struggling with it. So if there is a tool or a module or a plugin that we can install to make our life easier, we will try it, and if we like it, we will definitely go with it. So what developer experience and Dungeons and Dragons have in common? I would say that there is one important aspect of those two things that is the same, which is basically related to the aspect of learning. So if we have a Dungeons and Dragons, if you are a dungeon master, you probably already know the set of rules, and you already know how to build a character, how to run a session, and so on and so on. But you will run these sessions with with friends or with people who haven't done it yet. So you would need to explain to them the rules so that they can basically play the game. And it's almost the same as with trying a new module, plugin, or a product or software, is that we need to have this kind of like getting started or quick start, or basically instructions on how we can actually use this tool to solve our problems. And I can tell you from experience that at the beginning, when I was running my sessions, D&D sessions, and I wasn't paying that much attention into making the learning experience as good as possible, players were becoming frustrated because they didn't understand all the rules. They were trying to do something that was against the rules, so it was difficult for them to understand what they can or what they cannot do. So making this learning experience as easy as possible was crucial for them to have the fun sooner than later. So the easier we will make it for the new D&D players to start, the better the experience will be. And it's just like with developers learning a new tool. Before we go to the patterns, like the good developer experience patterns, let's talk briefly about the metrics that we can use to audit if our tool or software has actually a good developer experience. So first of all, we have quality of documentation. And what I mean by that is if the documentation of each tool or a plugin or a feature is all there, is it easy to follow and complete? And in here, I would like to share the example of the documentation of Storyblok, which in my opinion does it really, really well, purely because by looking at this documentation, there's like not an issue or not a problem if you have certain framework, because as you can see, you have instructions for Next.js, Next, React, Vue, Astro, Svelte, Remix, Gatsby, and probably even more community supported frameworks. So basically, with such amount of knowledge, you can start a project with Storyblok, no matter what framework you will use. Then the developer satisfaction score. We can audit the satisfaction of developers who are using our software to see how happy they are with the tool. Maybe they have some feedback, maybe they have some ideas that they would like to see in the application. And the problem is that we, as developers who are developing a solution, we don't know everything. We are not like gods. We have some ideas on implementing some features or a product, but getting this feedback is crucial for making the product even better. This is also why open source is having such a good approach for improving developer experience, because we get this constant feedback from many people around the world who are telling us how we can make it better. And finally, my favorite one, which is time to first hello world. And this is the time needed for the new user to try the product. In the definition here on the left, I also mentioned amount of steps, because during such audit, where you will audit this kind of metric, the time to first hello world, you can check both. So the time and the amount of steps. So how such audit could look like? You can ask a friend or coworker who is not familiar with your product to create a hello world application with it. So how will this person approach is probably they would search the internet, like how I can build a hello world app with XYZ, right? Or we'll go to the documentation of a product and click on the installation or quick start guide. You can record such a meeting or even just observe it and measure the time and the amount of steps, as well as the issues that the user encountered along the way. You can repeat it also with few users to have more meaningful results, because auditing just one person might not be that meaningful. And honestly, I can tell you from experience, because I was doing such experiments or audits, and it took me around an hour. So I audited like few people for 5 to 10 minutes. And it gave us a lot of useful feedback on what we can improve, because we had, for example, inconsistencies in the naming, we had inconsistencies in the dependencies used in the project, and so on, which was causing the frustration, which was causing the users to not know how they can build the simple hello world. So if they have bad experience building hello world, what is the chance that they will like to go with the product for a fully, let's say, enterprise project? I would say pretty small. So in here, I would also like to mention the rule of 80-20, but it works here a bit different. So let me explain. If you deliver 80% of the functionality that the user needs in the first 10 to 15 minutes, they are more likely to spend additional 2 or 3 hours to get the additional 20%. Why? Because they had great experience at the start. They already have 80% of what they needed in the first 15 minutes. This is something what we aim for, right? If we get to this point and we have this like 80% in 10 to 15 minutes, then user will spend this time, because they will understand that you cannot get everything in the first 15 minutes. but you already got quite a lot. So they will invest more time into getting this 20% more. So examples of good developer experience. First of all, same result with less steps. Let's take a look at the example of how we can add Tailwind to Vite. Probably some of you already did that, or many of you already did that. So this example is taken directly from the Tailwind website. I know that Tailwind released a new version a few days ago, so maybe there are some subtle differences in my code samples here, but in general, the approach will be quite similar. First of all, we have install required packages. So we install Tailwind, PostCSS, Autoprefixer. Next, we have to generate the tailwind config.js file with this command. We need to configure this already generated Tailwind config file to add the content about the index.html and the src for our components. Then we add Tailwind directives to index.css, so base, components, and utilities. And we run the project with npm run dev or whatever package manager you are using. Let's now take a look at how we can add Tailwind to Next. First of all, what we need to do is we need to install required packages, and we do it by using Naxi instead. So we go npx Naxi module add Tailwind CSS. So this is the first step. And the second step is to run the project. And that's all. We don't need to add the Tailwind config. We don't need to add the styles to the global CSS file. We don't need to add anything to the content. It just works. And recently, I had a very similar experience when I started a new game. It's not like fully DnD. It's based on DnD. It's like it's the Divinity Original Sin board game. And I was really pleasantly surprised that the creators of this board game, what they did is they provided a specific set of cards and locations and even shorter instructions just for the tutorial phase. And if you wanted to see more, like open the box further and see what else is inside, you got this big card telling you, don't open this until you finish the tutorial. This is great because I'm a person who doesn't like to have too many things. I like to focus on what is needed for me to achieve the goal. And at this stage, for me, to achieve the goal, the point was to go through the tutorial and learn the basics. This is a really great experience. Next, great documentation. And in here, I would also like to shout out to Next for a really great documentation in terms of the core concepts, the additional things we can do with the framework, the examples, API, not only the basic examples, but also advanced usage of certain parts of the framework. Basically, if you are having a problem with Next and you use a search bar at the top and you start typing what is your problem, there is a high chance that you will get an answer. And it's very similar to DnD. You have DnD Beyond, where you can start learning DnD with free rules. You don't have to buy any kind of like scenario first or a set of figurines or something. You just go there. There is a free set of rules that you can start playing as a dungeon master or as a player, and instructions will differ. Extensions to the core. We have the core framework, but it's not enough. We have to get some integrations, modules, and plugins. So in here, Next delivers as well. So we have, I mentioned that I'm part of the ecosystem, Next ecosystem team, which means that I'm maintaining some of the modules. Maybe you use Next Image or Next Security or Next Cloudinary, Algolia. I'm helping the Next core team to maintain those modules. So as I mentioned, you have a core that you are satisfied with, and you're looking for how you can extend it, like add a CMS, add an image optimizer, add a CSS framework, add a UI library, and so on and so on. And it's very similar with the DnD. So you have different systems, like, for example, the Pathfinder or the Dark Eye. You have the Call of Cthulhu, which can be played the same rules, but with the different like items. And recently, also, DnD created the scenario for Lord of the Rings. So if you are not very, very keen on just like a basic DnD, you can have a lot of things to choose from to make your experience of playing better. So I gave you 3 examples of Next, and I think you know where I'm going with it in a talk that is about good developer experience. So developers love good developer experience, right? So in my opinion, we should make it a default, not a nice to have feature. Before I finish my talk, I would like to give you a cool Vue announcement. So in March, during the Vue Amsterdam conference, we will be sharing the State of Vue report for 2025, where maybe some of you contributed to the survey. In this report, we will be sharing challenges Vue developers face nowadays, the statistics about the usage, the use cases and case studies for migrations and for improvements to the Vue applications, and so on and so on. But that is not all. We have also another secret announcement to share that will be also shared in March. And I will just give you a sneak peek that if you missed a Vue newsletter, you will be quite happy then. That will be all from my side. Thank you very much for having me. If you'd like to stay in touch, and I highly recommend to do that, you can find me at Dev2. I have blog at X or Blue Sky or at YouTube at Jakub Andrzejewski. It's my handle, or at GitHub at Barosian. So yeah, thanks very much for having me, and I think we proceed to questions.
Yes, we do. We have a few questions for you. All right. So, first one, how do you balance flexibility and simplicity in API design?
Well, it is a tough one, and we had this case in Vue Storefront. So in this approach, what we had was that we wanted to deliver certain functionalities for the e-commerce in a form of composables. But the problem is that we wanted to deliver functionalities to handle things like fetching the product page or product data or categories or user state or checkout and stuff like that. But the problem was that we had to make some things static, let's say. So extending them or customizing them wasn't that great. So, and we were also using we published those composables as a package. So users were basically not able to modify them easily because it was like a code that they were downloading to the app and just using it. So if they change it, like a patch it will be probably a breaking change in the next versions. So at a certain point, what we decided to do is we decided to go with the approach where we give the code in a form not as a package, but as already written code, so that the users still get the result, but they can modify them the way they need. This also comes with some issues, like, for example, what if there is a new version, right? How they can migrate. So at this stage, what we needed to do is we needed to also provide a good migration guide for the users, how they can easily migrate the app to the newer version, where we added, for example, some fixes or new features. But it was definitely a better experience than the previous one, where basically users weren't able to change anything.
Awesome.
So
Thank you.
just to answer, it is difficult, but you have to find the right balance between. The best is to get the feedback, because we created something that we thought was good, and for us it was solving a problem because we were the guys who were developing it. So we didn't really care that much about the customizability, because as someone who is developing it, you usually focus mainly on the happy paths rather than extending it to any possible scenario. So getting the feedback from the actual users and iterating with your solution based on this feedback, this is something that I would recommend.
Thank you. All right. What strategies do you use for gathering developer feedback?
This is rather a difficult one because I mentioned a few examples in my presentation, like the time to first hello world, which we did, and it gave us a lot of feedback. We haven't used the service that much. I think this service, they need to be created really well specifically for the developers to be interested in contributing to them. Purely because we as developers want to go through forms fast, don't want to spend 20 minutes answering one question. So I think that the time to first hello world, this is something that gave us a lot of useful feedback, and it doesn't take that much time because, as I mentioned, unless building a hello world with your product takes an hour, then it will take time. But if not, if it takes 20 minutes, for example, then you can do few sessions like this where you observe the users and you make some notes, and based on that you can get some useful feedback, right? Maybe, as I mentioned, you have a different naming. In our case, for example, in the documentation we had npm as a package manager while the project was using yarn, and the problem was that even though you can just say that it's just a different package manager, there might be some subtle differences. And in this particular case, when the user tried to install the dependencies with npm, it was making the project fail. So we weren't aware of that much because we were building this project, so we had it already prepared, we had all the dependencies installed and so on and so on, and we knew in our heads that we used yarn, right? But someone in the documentation, when they were writing it, used npm, and for that, if a user wanted to go through the quick start guide, he was failing or she was failing purely because there was a difference in the dependencies. Or if your quick start guide is not clear, like it's not clear how you can actually try the product. You can get a lot of information, or is it very complex? It requires you to configure 10 environment variables to make it work. So, and this is something that, for example, can happen to, or already happened to, for example, Next Hub, the project created by Next Labs. When they first announced that they have this free tier where you can build and deploy your app full stack applications to Cloudflare, I tried it out because I was really interested in this idea. But the problem there was that in order to build the app and deploy it, you needed to have the Cloudflare account, which at this stage needed like your card details and so on. Like it was a free trial; it wasn't like fully free. So I messaged Sebastian from Next Labs, and I said to him, maybe it will be possible to make it free, right? Maybe there is a way that you can deploy without actually needing to have this free trial. And Seb told me, yeah, that's a good idea. We'll try it. And the week or 2 weeks after, he said to me, now it's possible to go without this free trial. You can just deploy it freely.
Very cool.
So feedback from the users.
And last question of, don't you have to reference the Tailwind CSS in nux.config.ts modules property?
No longer. No longer, because if you use Nuxi, it will automatically update your modules array. This wasn't done before, and it is also something that we were discussing internally. I think there was a RFC that I also wanted to contribute to, and I gave some ideas on actually including those modules automatically. So the initial idea was that we wouldn't need to register the module in modules at all if the module, for example, doesn't need any configuration from start. But Puya messaged told me there then that the better option would be to actually push to this array of modules instead, because there will be cases where, for example, certain modules need to be registered there, because for example, some users don't use like modules Algolia and then the keyword Algolia for configuration. They use the array where the first element is the name of the module and the second is the configuration. So here might be some conflicts. So yeah, in general, if you install it with npm or yarn or pnpm, you would need to add it manually. But if you use npx, it will be automatically added to the modules array.
That's a good reason to use that package installer. All right. Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. See you.